The auction crowd laughed as Daniel raised his hand for the final bid. $10, he whispered. They shook their heads, calling her a waste, a dead horse. But Daniel ignored them, because when he brushed the mud off her side that evening, his heart stopped cold. There it was, a forgotten brand glowing in the barn light. The mark of a legendary bloodline lost to fire and time. What he uncovered next would bring an entire town to its knees. Welcome to your channel name. Let's uncover what really happened. Dust and hay filled the morning air as Daniel stepped onto the auction grounds, heart pounding with equal parts excitement and unease. He spotted her before anyone else did. A gaunt sorrel mare standing quietly in a pen of restless horses. The faint halo of dust around her coat hinted at long days under relentless sun. Neighbors muttered that she wouldn't last another round, but something in her gentle eyes stopped Daniel cold. He watched her lean into the wind, ears flicking at distant shouts, and felt a tug he couldn't ignore. When bidding began, others threw in their offers with loud confidence. Daniel's hand hovered over his $10 bill long enough for doubt to whisper. Wasn't he wasting his money? Yet the sight of her vulnerable form, ribs barely concealed beneath dull hair, convinced him otherwise. He raised his hand, voice steady as he called out, $10. A hush fell. The auctioneer blinked, then pounded his gavel. Sold. As Daniel led the mare through the rutted lot toward his truck, he noticed how her head dipped in weariness, tail swishing once before stilling. A cluster of onlookers exchanged pitying glances. An old rancher spat tobacco juice and muttered that Daniel was soft, chasing a dead horse. Daniel ignored him. He looped a lead rope over her halter and lifted her gently into the flatbed, careful not to jostle her frail frame. By the time he secured her with a sling of straps, the crowd had disbanded, their whispers swallowed by the wind. Daniel climbed into the driver's seat and glanced back at the mare, who nuzzled the dusty boards as if finding comfort in the motion. The engine rumbled to life, and the truck lurched forward, tires stirring fine particles of sand. Daniel guided the vehicle onto the country road, aware of only two things: the steady rhythm of the engine and the soft sound of her breath. With each mile that carried them away from the auction's dusty chaos, he felt a growing conviction that this horse, bought for a price no one else would pay, held a secret worth uncovering. The sun had climbed higher by the time Daniel eased the mare into his barn, the faded boards creaking as she shifted. He knelt beside her, brushing a tangle of straw and dust from her flank, and felt the warmth of her skin beneath calloused fingertips. In the stillness, the barn silence seemed to press in, broken only by the mare's gentle snuffle and the distant hum of cicadas outside. His heart thrummed with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. He'd paid $10 for her, but what would that bargain truly yield? Daniel unhooked a battered tin bucket and filled it with cool water. The mare dipped her muzzle, drinking with a thirst that spoke of days gone without relief. He watched as each swallow lightened the tension in her flanks, imagined the distance she'd traveled alone under that harsh sun. In that moment, her survival became his purpose, a mission born from a $10 dream. He fetched handfuls of alfalfa, tucking them into a corner of her stall. The mare picked at the hay with slow precision, as though testing its sweetness and finding it acceptable. The softness of her ears against his palm brought a small, cautious smile to Daniel's face. She might have been broken by neglect and exhaustion, but there was a spark in her, an ember that flickered with life. Night approached, and Daniel returned with lamps lit, casting long shadows across the corral. He filled another bucket and lingered, tracing the mare's slender neck with the back of his hand. He whispered promises of rest and care, of tomorrow's feed and soft bedding. Whether she understood his words or not, her steady breathing reassured him that she heard something, a promise of safety. Later, as Daniel lay on a makeshift cot in the loft above, he stared at the moonlight filtering through cracks in the roof. The $10 bill, now crumpled in his pocket, felt heavier than before. It was more than currency. It was the catalyst for everything that followed. He drifted towards sleep, dreaming of possibilities, healing, discovery, a journey that began with a price no one else believed in but him. In the quiet dark, Daniel vowed that the mare's story would not end in that auction pen. The next morning's light slanted through the barn's slatted walls as Daniel arrived with fresh hay. As he brushed the mare's flank, his fingers paused on a raised edge beneath dried mud, a faint, looping swirl that didn't belong. He dipped a rag in a bucket of warm water and gently rubbed the spot, revealing a worn brand etched into her skin, a stylized arc curling into an intricate vine. Daniel's pulse quickened. He'd seen plenty of ranch brands, but nothing like this. He stepped back, letting the mare, now fully awake, shift her weight from one leg to the other. The brand's curves caught the morning beam, drawing his eye again and again. He fetched a small grooming brush and worked the surrounding area free of grit. As the pattern emerged in full, he traced its lines with his fingertip. Whoever had marked her chose that symbol for a reason, and Daniel felt certain it held a secret. Over breakfast, Daniel rifled through a drawer in his kitchen for his grandfather's old ledger, hoping for a clue. He'd inherited pages of faded entries, each recording livestock purchases and pedigrees from decades past. Flipping to the ranch section, he found a single reference, Riverbend, Vine Mark. His breath caught. Riverbend Ranch had closed after a barn fire years ago, its herd thought lost forever. He returned to the barn, heart hammering, and studied the mare's calm profile. Her soft eyes seemed to watch him, as though she understood the stir she'd awakened in him. Daniel knelt beside her and spoke in her ear, voice low with wonder. He pictured the long-ago fields of Riverbend, the scent of sage and barley, the cheers at weekend rodeos. The brand must have tied her to that storied place, and perhaps to a history he could almost touch. By noon, he drove dust-choked roads toward the county archive, the mare grazing contentedly in her stall behind him. With the Riverbend name etched in his mind and the morning's revelation fresh in his blood, Daniel felt the first pull of a bigger story, one that began with a curious mark and promised to uncover the mare's true past. Daniel returned to the barn just as the sun cleared the horizon, determined to learn everything that symbol could tell him. He filled a metal basin with warm water and mixed in a scoop of gentle soap, then knelt beside Phoenix, her coat freshly dusted by the morning breeze. Working slowly, he lathered the mare's branded flank, watching foam swirl around the raised lines. With each careful stroke, the design sharpened. A looping script are entwined with a vine that curled back on itself, delicate yet unmistakable. When the brand was fully washed, Daniel gently patted the mare dry, tracing its curves with a fingertip. The lines felt smooth beneath his skin, etched into her like a signature of belonging. He let his mind wander back to the ledger's brief mention, Riverbend Ranch. Could this mare have survived the fire that destroyed the place? He pictured the blaze roaring through wooden beams, survivors fleeing into night, and wondered how she must have escaped. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma, the local historian he'd tracked down yesterday. "Check your email," she'd written. In the barn office, he opened his laptop and found a scanned photograph of a young mare bearing the same brand, standing proudly beside Riverbend's aging stallion. The caption read, "Roxanne, 1969 breeding champion." Daniel's breath caught. This was more than a ranch emblem. It was the mark of a lineage once celebrated for speed and heart. He replayed Emma's note out loud. Riverbend's fire was rumored to have destroyed every horse, and yet here was Phoenix, bearing Roxanne's brand decades later. His heart pounded with excitement and disbelief. Could she be that mare's granddaughter? Great-granddaughter? The possibilities stretched out before him like open prairie. Across the stall, Phoenix chewed slowly, nostrils flaring as she watched him. In her steady gaze, Daniel sensed patient strength, the same resolve that must have driven her ancestors through trials of fire and fate. He closed his laptop and scooped fresh water into her bucket, whispering gratitude for her silent cooperation. In that moment, he vowed to follow the brand's story wherever it led, from dusty archives and forgotten ruins to the people who remembered Riverbend's glory. The mare's past was waiting to be unveiled, and Daniel knew their journey had only just begun. Night settled over the valley as Daniel sat beneath the porch light of Molly's general store, sipping coffee and listening to the soft hum of crickets. Word of the mayor's brand had spread, and tonight he'd arranged to meet Hank Thompson, one of the oldest ranchers who still recalled Riverbend's heyday. When Hank arrived, lantern in hand, his weathered face held curiosity more than skepticism. They walked toward the fenced paddock where Phoenix stood, moonlight glinting on her chestnut coat. Hank ran a finger along the vine-like curves of her flank. His gaze grew distant, and he cleared his throat. "Folks round here always talked about Roxanne," he began quietly. "They said she moved like a ghost across the plains, heart as steady as the river, after which they named the ranch." Daniel eased closer. Did they really believe she was different? Hank nodded. Legends grew fast. They said when the blaze roared through Riverbend, Roxanne saved her colt by leading him through smoke and flames. Nobody could explain how. After that, people whispered that her blood carried something special, courage, maybe even a touch of luck. The wind rustled hay in the stall, and Phoenix lifted her head, ears pricked. Daniel thought for a moment that she recognized the name. "Do you think she passed that to her descendants?" he asked. "Could be," Hank said, his lantern casting shadows across his lined features. "Only trouble with legends is they grow wilder every telling. Some claim the brand itself was blessed, so any horse bearing it couldn't be broken or broken-hearted." Daniel watched Phoenix shift, releasing a soft breath. He flicked on a small flashlight and caught the brand's silhouette, the same looping R and vine that linked her to Roxanne. "I want to find the truth behind the tales," he said, voice firm. Hank studied him for a long moment. Then he smiled wryly. "You're chasing stories, son, but be careful. Some doors aren't meant to open, and some ghosts prefer to stay hidden." Daniel nodded, the cool night air pressing around them. As Hank's boots crunched away across the gravel, Daniel remained by the stall, considering the whispered legends of courage and fire. Ahead lay dusty archives, reluctant witnesses, and perhaps answers no one had dared seek. With dawn still hours away, he settled beneath the stars, determined to follow the mayor's trail of myth and memory wherever it might lead. Daniel rose before dawn, lantern in hand, and made his way to the county archives. The old brick building smelled of aged paper and dust when he stepped inside. He greeted the clerk, a bespectacled woman named Rosa, and explained his quest. With a nod, she led him to a metal cabinet labeled Local Fires, 1960 to 1980. Inside, brittle newspapers lay stacked chronologically. Daniel gently eased out a bundle dated July 14th, 1972, the week of the Riverbend fire. Unfolding the yellowed pages, he found the headline, "Blaze Ravages Riverbend Ranch, Several Horses Missing." The article described the inferno that tore through wooden stalls, trapping livestock in its path. A grainy photograph showed flames roaring beneath a gabled roof. His breath caught as he searched for names, and there it was, Roxanne, listed among the survivors. The text hinted that she'd led orphan foals through a gap in the fence to safety, though no eyewitnesses remained to confirm the tale. Daniel photocopied the clipping and flipped through more pages until he unearthed a small sidebar. A handwritten note from a former ranch hand recalling how Roxanne carried her colt across smoldering ground, her brand glowing like a living emblem. The margins were scrawled with names: E. Carver, J. Wells. Potential witnesses long gone. Clutching the copies, Daniel returned to the barn and sat beside Phoenix, spreading the papers across a bale of straw. He read aloud the descriptions of heat and panic, of desperate riders and frightened stock. The mare nickered softly, as if sensing the gravity of her lineage. Next, he retrieved Emma's grandmother's leather-bound journal. Its pages smelled faintly of smoke and lavender. Leafing to a passage dated July 15th, she wrote of arriving at the charred remains and finding a single hoofprint leading away from the ruins. No tracks of human intervention, only the mare's resolve. Emma's grandmother had sketched the brand in ink, noting its unusual vine motif and speculating it was meant to symbolize rebirth after devastation. As Daniel absorbed both accounts, printed and penned. A flame of determination ignited within him. The threads of history were weaving together. Newspaper reports, eyewitness notes, and personal recollections all pointed to one truth. Phoenix was more than a survivor. She carried a legacy forged in fire and preserved on these fragile pages. At first light, Daniel loaded his truck with tools and the photocopied clippings, then drove the winding back road toward the old Riverbend property. Sagebrush brushed the windows as he turned down the overgrown driveway, tires crunching over rusted nail and broken pottery. The remains of the barn stood jagged against the pale sky, blackened beams reaching like charred fingers toward the clouds. He parked beside the splintered corral gate and stepped onto the scorched earth, heart thudding in his chest. Each breath carried the scent of ash and sage. With careful steps, he picked his way through collapsed timbers, noting where the fire's fury had scoured the ground bare. He paused at a rusted horseshoe, half buried in ash, then crouched to examine a line of hoof prints leading toward a gap in the fence, just as Emma's grandmother had described. Daniel spread out his clippings on a flat stone, comparing the photograph of roaring flames to the twisted metal remains before him. He imagined Roxanne's herd panicking, riders calling her name in vain, smoke blurring the edges of everything. A sudden wind stirred, snapping a loose board overhead and sending a shower of charred splinters to the ground. His pulse quickened at the reminder that this place had once been alive with hooves and laughter. He moved deeper into the ruin, flashlight in hand, and found the corner where Emma's grandmother had sketched the brand. There, faintly etched into a fallen beam, were the same looping vine curves. Daniel knelt and traced them with a fingertip. Time and flame had worn them, but the symbol remained unmistakable. He slid a notebook under his arm and began a careful rubbing, the pencil whispering over the wood grain until the brand appeared in graphite relief. As the sun climbed, he explored the perimeter, discovering half-buried fence posts and a collapsed feed trough customized with the Riverbend name in wrought iron. Each artifact anchored his conviction that Phoenix was not lost chance, but destiny returned. Driving back, Daniel glanced at the ruins fading in his rearview mirror. The journey to uncover the mayor's past had led him across miles and memories, but standing among the ashes had ignited something deeper, a sense that history, like fire, could both destroy and reveal. And now, with evidence pressed in his satchel, he would carry Riverbend's legacy forward, guided by the mayor who bore its mark. Daniel found the tack box tucked beneath a fallen beam, its lid rusted shut yet stubbornly intact. He pried it open with a flathead screwdriver, and the hinges sighed as decades of dust billowed into the morning light. Inside lay a collection of well-worn leather halters, bits, and a stack of yellowed papers bound with twine. He lifted the documents gingerly, careful not to tear their fragile edges. Unwrapping the bundle revealed letters and receipts from Riverbend's operation, their dates spanning seasons rather than years, as though the ranch had functioned in timeless cycles. One letter stood out, penned in an elegant hand, an apology from the ranch owner to a buyer who'd paid full price for a horse that never arrived. Beneath the flourish of the signature, Daniel recognized the looping are entwined with a vine motif, identical to Phoenix's brand. He rifled through more papers, uncovering a stud book detailing Mares and foals bred for their endurance. Phoenix's name appeared twice, crossed out with a note. Too spirited for market, retain. A chill ran down Daniel's spine. This mare, then known as Filament's Fire, had been prized but withheld. The fire must have changed her destiny, sending her, and her lineage, into anonymity. A faded photograph slipped from beneath the pile. It showed a young woman in riding boots, arm draped over a mare whose flank was obscured by shadow, except for a glint where the brand would be. On the back, a scrawled date, June 3rd, 1971. Daniel held the image up to the sunlight, imagining the pride in her smile and the promise in the mare's stance. He replaced the papers and closed the box, heart pounding at the secrets now in his hands. The tack box had been hidden for reasons he could only guess, perhaps to protect the ranch's reputation after the fire, or to shelter the mare's true worth from opportunists. Either way, the discovery confirmed one thing. Phoenix was more than a survivor. She embodied Riverbend's legacy, guarded through time by those who believed in her spirit. Securing the tack box to the back of his truck, Daniel glanced at Phoenix grazing nearby. Her chestnut coat caught the late afternoon glow, and he felt a surge of respect for her unspoken endurance. With the tack box's secret revealed, he knew the next step: finding those who had kept her story alive and helping the world remember the courage hidden in her brand. Daniel guided Phoenix through the town's main street as curious neighbors peered from storefronts. Word of the branded mare had spread like wildfire, and hushed conversations followed them from the feed store to the cafe. He tethered Phoenix outside Miller's diner and stepped inside, clutching a worn photograph from the tack box. Marge, the diner's owner, poured coffee as Daniel explained his discovery: the Riverbend legacy reborn in Phoenix's coat. Regulars gathered at the counter, noses buried in their mugs. Old Mr. Gonzalez, who delivered hay decades ago, squinted at the photo. "That's Mary Ellen," he whispered, voice trembling. She was the ranch owner's daughter. Rode that mare through dust storms like she owned the wind. Daniel laid the photograph flat, letting each patron study the image. Voices rose in excitement and incredulity. Some recalled Sunday rodeos, where Riverbend's horses had thrilled the crowd. Others remembered the smoke that curled into the sky the night of the fire, and the rumors that at least one horse had escaped unseen. A murmur ran through the room. Could Phoenix be that very survivor? Outside, the noon heat shimmered off the pavement as Daniel led Phoenix to the feed store. He showed Mr. Miller the brand, recounting the tack box letters. Miller's eyes widened. "That mark was special," he said. "My father used to say the vine meant growth after hardship. They believed any horse bearing it would endure whatever came its way." By afternoon, Daniel and Phoenix reached the post office, where postcards hung on strings near the counter. A retired mail carrier, Ruth, approached, holding an old postcard she'd saved. It depicted a line of well-groomed Mares on parade. One turned its head just enough to reveal the brand Glenn had described years ago. "I kept this," she said. "Felt like it should mean something." As the sun dipped low, Daniel returned to the barn with pockets full of stories and proofs: postcards, maps, business cards of locals who remembered Riverbend. Phoenix nudged his side, as if proud to be recognized at last. Sitting quietly in her stall, she chewed on hay while Daniel spread his new trove of town legends across the floorboards. In the gathering dusk, he realized that Phoenix's journey had become everyone's story, a tapestry woven from memories and whispered lore. And as the mare's silhouette darkened in the lantern light, Daniel knew the town's collective memory would guide him to the next chapter of her untold past. Daniel led the mare into the soft light of dawn, guiding her to the corral's center where dew clung to the grass like diamonds. He carried a notebook filled with the day's discoveries, stories of resilience, faded photographs, whispered memories, and paused to watch her breathe in the new morning. He knelt beside her, brushing a strand of mane behind her ear, and felt a surge of gratitude for every hardship she had endured. Her steady gaze met his, unflinching and calm, as if she understood the weight of her story. Daniel opened his notebook and read aloud the passage from Emma's grandmother's journal, that after the Riverbend fire, the mare had emerged through smoke and flame to protect her colt. Across town, neighbors spoke of her legend, each retelling adding another layer of awe. He searched the pages for a name that fit her journey. Philemon's Fire was her registry title, but it felt too clinical, too tied to the past. This mare deserved something reborn, something that captured her survival and the hope she inspired. Daniel closed his eyes, imagining scorch marks turning to new grass, ashes giving way to green shoots. When he opened them, he smiled and whispered, "Phoenix." The word felt like a promise, a testament to rising anew. The mare's ears flicked, and she shifted so her head hovered over his shoulder, as though accepting the name he offered. Daniel reached up, tracing the brand on her flank, and murmured, "You are Phoenix now." He stood and paced the corral's edge, envisioning the name painted on a wooden plaque by her stall. Phoenix dipped her nose into a bucket of water, splashing droplets that glinted in the morning sun. Daniel watched them fall, each bead a small celebration of her rebirth. Back in his garage, he fashioned a simple sign of reclaimed barnwood and painted Phoenix in looping script over a vine motif. By midday, it hung above her stall, a banner announcing her new life. When he returned to the corral, he found her standing beneath it, tail swishing contentedly. As Daniel wiped paint smudges from his hands, he realized how the act of naming had transformed both of them. She had carried a legacy through fire and time, and now, with her new name, she would carry it forward. In that moment, the legend of Phoenix truly began. Daniel pulled his truck to a stop by the edge of Emma Carver's family homestead, the same property where Riverbend Ranch once thrived. Emma, slender and wary-eyed, emerged from the weathered, clapboard house, clutching her grandmother's leather journal. She studied Phoenix through the open stall door, lips parting in a soft exhale. "Hello," Daniel said, stepping forward. "I thought you might like to meet her." Emma nodded, lifting a hand to rest on the stall's worn plank. Phoenix lowered her head, nostrils flaring as she sensed Emma's presence. The mare's eyes, reflective pools of understanding, held Emma's gaze for a long moment before she blinked slowly. Emma's voice trembled. I saw her in your photos, but seeing her in person, she brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. It's like I'm looking at my grandmother's stories come alive. Daniel retrieved the old journal and handed it to Emma. She opened to a page where her grandmother had sketched the vine-entwined brand in ink, the lines wavering with age. Emma traced the drawing with a fingertip, then looked up at Phoenix. "This was her, Filament's Fire," she whispered. "Grandma named her that because she thought the mare's spirit was as thin and bright as a filament, glowing even in darkness." Her eyes met Daniel's. "She'd have called you a fool for paying $10 at auction, but she'd have admired what you've done." Daniel glanced at Phoenix, who nickered softly. "I wanted her legacy honored." Emma closed the journal and smiled, relief and wonder mingling on her face. "Thank you for giving her a name that fits." She knelt beside Phoenix, pressing a hand to the mare's flank near the brand. "Emma Carver," she introduced herself softly. Phoenix nudged her shoulder, and Emma laughed through tears. They spent the afternoon on the porch, poring over journal entries and sharing family photos of Riverbend's golden days. Ranch hands and dust-coated jeans, her grandmother's proud smile as she led Roxanne through the paddock. Emma's stories filled gaps Daniel hadn't known existed. Secret breeding programs, late-night stall checks, the shock when the fire erupted. As sunset painted the sky in rose and amber, Emma closed the journal and rested it on Daniel's knee. "You've given her, and our history, a future," she said. Daniel nodded, meeting her gaze in the twilight. Together, they watched Phoenix graze quietly, a living bridge between past and promise. Daniel settled at the kitchen table of Emma's homestead, the leather-bound journal opened before him like a treasure chest. The lamplight revealed delicate script and faded ink drawings of Mares with looping brands. Emma poured tea from a chipped pot and joined him, her eyes bright with anticipation. Turning to a worn page dated June 30th, 1971, Emma's grandmother described the day she first met the mare named Filament's Fire. Her coat shone like molten copper, the entry read, and her spirit flared at the gentlest touch. A sketched vine curled around the brand, the lines echoing the mare's elegance. Daniel traced the illustration with his fingertip, noting the meticulous attention to each leaf and tendril. Further in, an entry recounted the breeding program at Riverbend. "We select only those whose courage matches the river's flow." Beneath that, a note in the margin, "Lucy, your great-granddam, possessed strength we feared to tame." Daniel realized Lucy must have been Filament's Fire's dam, her spirit passing through bloodlines to Phoenix. Emma paused at another passage, dated July 15th, 1972. It described finding a single hoof print at the edge of the fire's devastation. No other tracks mar the ash. She led them free. The writing trembled, ink blotting where tears might have fallen. Emma inhaled softly. Grandma believed Philemon's fire was chosen to lead her foals to safety, she whispered. Daniel leaned back, absorbing the weight of her words. The journal was more than a record. It was a testament to faith in the mare's resilience. He flipped ahead to a later entry, an addendum scribbled in haste. We cannot replace what's lost, but her legacy endures in every heart she touched. Emma closed her eyes and placed a hand on the journal's cover. Daniel met her gaze. Your grandmother wrote these as if the mare were family, he said. She captured more than history. She preserved belief. Emma nodded, her fingers lingering on the binding. They spent the evening reading select passages aloud, Emma's voice steady as she breathed life into her grandmother's memories. Outside, Phoenix stood by the stall door, ears swiveling toward the soft cadence of the journal's pages. In that warm kitchen, surrounded by echoes of the past, Daniel and Emma forged a new chapter, one that honored both the mare's legacy and the woman who had first believed in her remarkable spirit. Daniel spread the sketch Emma's grandmother had made across the corral fence, securing it with a piece of twine so the morning breeze fluttered its edges. The vine-entwined brand gleamed in graphite, every curve and leaf rendered with meticulous care. He stood back and watched Phoenix drift forward, nostrils flaring as she sniffed the paper. Emma knelt beside him, heart pounding with anticipation. She knew you'd find this, Emma whispered. Daniel nodded, tracing the pencil lines with a fingertip. At the mare's approach, Phoenix paused, head tilting as her soft muzzle brushed the page. Her eyes flicked from the sketch to Daniel, then back to the brand on her flank. In that moment, Emma realized Phoenix recognized her own story in ink. The mare's ears pricked forward as if confirming that the symbol drawn decades ago belonged to her, that the bond between flesh and art had endured time. A thrill passed through Daniel's chest, proof that this was no ordinary horse, but a living link to history. Daniel quieted the stirrings in his mind and spoke gently. That's you, Phoenix. Your name, your brand. The mare pressed her nose against the wood post, nostrils brushing the sketch once more. Emma slipped her hand onto Phoenix's shoulder. She sees it, Emma breathed. She knows. Across the fence, sunlight danced on the sketch's surface, illuminating details Daniel had missed. Tiny etchings of barley leaves and rippling water beneath the vine. Emma leaned in, studying the margins for clues. There in faint script was a single word: endurance. They returned the sketch to Emma's journal for safekeeping, but the moment lingered in their thoughts. Phoenix followed Daniel as he led her back to the barn, stepping in sync with his stride. He realized that recognition was more than a glance. It was acceptance. The mare had acknowledged the story written of her, and in turn had claimed it. That evening, Daniel and Emma placed a replica of the sketch above Phoenix's stall, a testament to her journey from legend to life. As they closed the barn door, Phoenix stood beneath the image, muzzle raised as if in salute. The brand in ink and the brand in flesh were united at last, sealing her identity across generations. The veterinarian's truck kicked up dust as it pulled into Daniel's driveway, Dr. Patel stepping out with a shoulder bag and keen eyes. Inside the barn, Phoenix stood alert, her chestnut coat gleaming in the afternoon sun. Daniel led her into the stall, where Patel examined her with gentle precision, stethoscope and thermometer laid aside as he reached for a small vial of blood. Emma hovered nearby, journal clutched in her arms. Patel drew a sample, labeling it with careful handwriting before heading back to his mobile lab. The waiting was tense. Daniel paced the corral, each hoofbeat echoing in his mind. When Patel returned, the dusk light cast long shadows across his thoughtful face. He handed Daniel a printout of the results, eyes bright with discovery. Phoenix carries the Riverbend strain, Patel announced. It's a genetic marker linked to endurance and resilience, traits bred out of necessity during harsh Nevada summers. This lineage was thought extinct. Daniel's breath caught. Emma leaned over his shoulder, scanning the technical terms that confirmed what hearts already believed. Patel continued, Her DNA matches samples we have from archived riverbend stock. This isn't just heritage, it's a direct line. He pointed to a chart showing allele frequencies, the riverbend markers highlighted in bold. Horses with this profile were prized for long-distance ranch work and desert survival. Outside, Phoenix shifted, nuzzling Daniel's hand as if sensing the moment's significance. Emma's eyes shone. "She's the living proof," she whispered. Patel nodded, carefully stowing his equipment. "This mare is more than a survivor. She's a bridge between past and present. Her bloodline's return could reshape conservation efforts for desert-adapted breeds." Daniel felt a surge of pride and resolve. The genetic revelation meant Phoenix's story had scientific weight, not just sentimental lore. He glanced at Emma and saw the same spark in her, ambition tempered by reverence. That night, as stars swept across the sky, Daniel penned the chapter's opening in his notebook, Bloodline Revealed. Beneath it, he listed plans to catalog Phoenix's lineage and reach out to breed registries. Emma set the journal beside him, and together they crafted letters to geneticists and conservation groups. In the moonlit barn, Phoenix stood by the stall door, her brand silhouetted against the planks. Daniel and Emma watched her, knowing this revelation would carry her legend far beyond their valley, ensuring the Riverbend legacy endured for generations to come. A sleek black SUV rolled up the gravel drive the next morning, its glossy finish at odds with the dusty barnyard. A sharply dressed man stepped out, briefcase in hand and sunglasses perched on his nose despite the overcast sky. He introduced himself as Victor Langley, a private collector of rare equine bloodlines. His voice was polite but clipped businesslike. Daniel led Victor to Phoenix's stall, watching as the collector's gaze sharpened at the mare's branded flank. Victor ran a finger lightly along the R and vine, nodding with approval. "Remarkable specimen," he said. "I've seen records, yes, but nothing compares to flesh and bone." He opened his briefcase, revealing crisp documents and a thick check made out to Daniel's name. "I'll offer you $100,000. No questions asked. Complete confidentiality." Daniel's chest tightened. He glanced at Emma, who stood beside him, face unreadable. He looked back at Langley, then at Phoenix, quietly chewing her hay. The mare's steady breath reminded him of the journey so far, every discovery, every whispered tale guiding him here. He squared his shoulders. "Thank you, but no." Langley's eyes narrowed. He closed the briefcase with a snap. "I am surprised. You realize how much this mare is worth to the right buyer. My offer will stand for 24 hours. He walked away without another word, the SUV's tires kicking up a swirl of dust. After the vehicle departed, Daniel exhaled slowly. Emma reached out, touching his arm. "You did right," she said softly. "Phoenix isn't a commodity." Daniel nodded, eyes drifting to the brand. "She's part of a living legacy, not a line item." That evening, sunlight filtered through the barn's louvers as Daniel penned a short note of refusal in his journal. He recorded Victor's offer and his decision to protect Phoenix's future. Emma read over his shoulder and underlined his words, "Integrity preserved." Later, Daniel stood outside under the vast desert sky, Phoenix grazing nearby. The stakes had become clear. His journey was no longer simply personal. Protecting the mare meant safeguarding her bloodline, her story, and the principles that had brought her back from legend to life. As night settled, Daniel pledged to honor that promise, whatever temptations might arise. The dawn light found Daniel at his desk, the refusal letter to Victor Langley sealed and ready for the morning mail. He paused before stamping it, eyes on the photograph of Phoenix clipped to his bulletin board, her proud stance beneath a sky vast enough for her freedom. With a decisive nod, he stamped the letter, returned to sender, and tucked it into his satchel. He arrived at the barn as Phoenix nickered softly, greeting him with gentle warmth. Daniel slid open the stall door and offered her a handful of oats. She ate with steady focus, then raised her head to meet his gaze. In that unspoken moment, he felt the weight of choosing her well-being over wealth. Emma appeared at the gate, journal under arm. She smiled, relief and admiration in her eyes. "I heard you sent it back," she said. Daniel nodded, brushing a hand over Phoenix's mane. "Some things are priceless," he replied. "Her story, her future, they're worth more than any sum." They spent the morning in the corral, cleaning fence posts and reinforcing gate latches. Emma recounted plans for a small foundation to support desert-adapted breeds, using Phoenix's tail as its cornerstone. Daniel listened, jotting notes in his notebook titled Sanctuary Plans. Rejecting Langley's fortune had opened a path towards something far greater. By afternoon, they stood overlooking the paddock as a breeze stirred sagebrush beyond the fence line. Daniel unfolded a blueprint Emma had drafted, a modest barn addition and a fenced grazing area designed for older horses. "It's imperfect," Emma said, "but genuine." Daniel traced the lines with his finger. "It's perfect because it's ours." As the sun dipped toward the horizon, they secured feed buckets and prepared to leave Phoenix for the night. The mare lingered at the stall door, breathing in the sense of home. Daniel patted Emma's shoulder. "Fortune would have been easy," he said softly, "but integrity is harder and worth every challenge." Walking back to the farmhouse under a sky brushed with pink and purple, Daniel felt light despite the road ahead. He had turned away from a fortune to embrace a vision, one that honored Phoenix's legacy and promised to carry it forward on his own terms. In the quiet dusk, he knew he had chosen rightly. The distant hum of engines and the scent of dust drew Daniel and Emma to the county fairgrounds one bright morning. Banners fluttered overhead, and the grandstands filled with eager faces, children perched on shoulders to catch glimpses of roping and barrel racing. Amid the bustling stalls, Daniel spotted a faded photo of Riverbend's rodeo team tacked to a bulletin board, riders astride sleek chestnuts, one mare leading the herd with a brand glinting in the sun. Emma pointed to the middle rider. "That's my grandmother," she said softly. "She rode Roxanne in the Grand Entry Parade every summer." Daniel traced the lines of the photo, imagining the roar of the crowd. They followed a narrow corridor backstage, where veteran cowhands polished saddles and recalled past glories. An elderly man named Joe leaned on his rigging, eyes misty as he described the prize-winning runs Roxanne made. Her hooves whipping up plumes of sand, her body a blur of grace and power. They reached the announcer's booth, and Joe invited them up. The microphone crackled as he shared their story with the audience. How a branded mare had carried her lineage through fire and time, inspiring a small-town legend. Below, children gasped and adults murmured in recognition. Emma felt a swell of pride as riders tipped hats in respect, and a slow, heartfelt cheer rose from the stands. Later, by the barrel race chute, Daniel met Marisol, a trainer who'd watched Riverbend's champions as a girl. She described Roxanne's uncanny ability to navigate tight turns, attributing it to her bond with Emma's grandmother and the spirit etched into her flank. "That brand wasn't just a mark," Marisol said, voice low. "It was a promise of heart." Phoenix stood quietly in her trailer, ears flicking at the distant applause. Emma opened the door, and the mare stepped out, head held high. Daniel led her to the arena's edge, where Joe produced the original rodeo ribbon from his vest pocket. With a gentle touch, he tied it to Phoenix's bridle, the ribbon's faded red complementing her chestnut coat. As Phoenix emerged into the dirt ring, her every step echoed the legacy of rodeo days past. The crowd fell silent, then broke into applause. In that moment, Daniel and Emma understood. The mare's history wasn't confined to ashes and archives. It lived on in the thundering hooves and roaring crowds, a testament to endurance and the unbroken spirit of Riverbend's rodeo legends. Daniel laid the sepia photograph flat on his kitchen table, its edges curled and surface mottled with age. The image showed Riverbend's parade, riders aligned in formation, Roxanne leading with her flank, turned to the camera, the brand visible but faded. He fetched a soft brush and gently swept away dust particles, then poured a drop of distilled water onto a cotton swab to lift a stubborn stain. Each motion was careful, deliberate, as though awakening a sleeping memory. Emma watched beside him, hands folded. "Be gentle," she murmured. "That photo holds more than an image." Daniel nodded, patience guiding each stroke. He adjusted the old lamp's angle, sending a warm beam across the surface so he could see fine details emerge. In the corner, the initials RC in faint ink came into view, the ranch owner's daughter marking her legacy. After an hour, the riders' faces sharpened, and the brand on Roxanne's flank gleamed through the restored contrast. Daniel traced the looping vine with a pencil, sketching over the photograph's own trace to preserve what remained. He snapped a high-resolution picture with his phone, archiving the restored likeness before returning to the original. Emma leaned forward, breath-catching. It's like she's alive again. Daniel placed the photo next to Phoenix's stall, propped against the railing. He stepped back and watched as Phoenix raised her head, nostrils flaring at the scent of dust and varnish. The mare's gaze met the restored image, and for a heartbeat, Emma thought she saw recognition flicker in Phoenix's eyes. Daniel printed a replica of the restored photograph in large format and had it framed in reclaimed barnwood. Together they hung it in the barn's tack room, where tools and journals lined the walls. The photograph stood as a bridge between past and present, its clarity honoring both Roxanne and Phoenix. That evening, as twilight settled, Daniel and Emma sat before the framed image and discussed plans to digitize the rest of Emma's family archive. With each photograph brought back to life, they were not only preserving Riverbend's history, they were ensuring that every story, every brand, would endure as vividly as the mare who carried it forward. Rain hammered the tin roof in the dead of night, transforming the corral into a muddy sea. Daniel awoke to the roar of water cascading through gutters and pooling in low spots. He grabbed his boots and flashlight, racing along the barn's exterior as wind-whipped sheets of rain blurred his vision. Inside, the stall floors were slick with rising water. Phoenix shifted anxiously, hooves splashing in shallow rivulets. Daniel opened her door and called softly, guiding her toward the aisle. Lightning illuminated the barn's rafters as she followed without hesitation, stepping carefully alongside him. Their breath mingled in the humid air as he led her toward higher ground beneath the tack loft. A crack echoed overhead as a loose board gave way, sending a spray of water and debris onto a pile of feed sacks. Daniel cursed and shone his light on a broken floorboard where water gushed through. He knelt, prying away saturated wood panels to divert the flow, but the force was too strong. Phoenix nickered softly, pressing her side against his arm. As the water receded into the trough he'd created, Daniel noticed a dark shape lodged between beams, a damp leather bundle bound with fraying twine. He pulled it free, dripping and weighty, and carried it to the loft steps. Settling on a dry hay bale, he untied the twine to reveal yellowed envelopes and brittle pages, forgotten correspondence from Riverbend. Emma arrived moments later, rain streaking her face. Together they fanned out the letters, careful not to tear the edges. One envelope bore the Riverbend seal. Inside lay a letter detailing a secret breeding ledger, including names of mares and foals hidden from prying eyes. Another contained promises of sale agreements, redacted to conceal Filament's fire's true value. Daniel lifted a final note, dated the night before the fire. Take the colt. Lead them east beyond the creek. Trust only the brand. His voice trembled as he read Emma's grandmother's handwriting, the words of a desperate plan to save her lineage. Phoenix stood quietly beside them, what mane clinging to her neck as if she understood the gravity of the find. In that flooded barn loft, the hidden letters revealed a fate long buried. Phoenix's ancestors had been deliberately preserved, smuggled through chaos into safety. Their legacy had survived by intent, not chance. As thunder rumbled, Daniel and Emma pressed the letters to their chests. The flood had unearthed more than damp memories. It had revealed the true lengths taken to protect a bloodline that refused to be lost. The morning sun burned off the last of the storm clouds as Daniel opened the barn doors wide. Fresh hay lined the aisle, and the air smelled of damp earth and promise. Neighbors and friends, drawn by Emma's messages and Daniel's invitations, gathered in small clusters beside the stalls. Children darted between hooves, while elders leaned on pitchfork handles, wiping rain from their hats. Phoenix stood at the center, newly groomed and calm. Daniel led her forward, haltering her with care. Emma held a stack of the flood-recovered letters and photographs, her eyes bright as she addressed the group. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "These papers were almost lost, but they tell the true story of Riverbend, of courage, survival, and community." One by one, she handed copies to those who recognized names and faces. The Thompsons who'd bred the first fire-branded mare, the Carvers who'd sheltered foals through the night of the blaze, the Gonzalezes who'd rallied riders to safety. Each recipient nodded, eyes misting as they touched the fragile paper. Daniel stepped forward, voice steady. "Today isn't about one horse or one ranch," he said, glancing at Phoenix. "It's about all of us, our histories intertwined with these legends." He gestured to the newly framed photograph of Roxanne restored above the tackroom door. "We're here to honor the past and ensure it lives on." A gentle murmur rippled through the crowd, memories shared and laughter rising. Hank Thompson produced an old saddlebag embroidered with the Riverbend vine and brand, passing it to Emma as a symbolic gift. Marisol brought fresh-baked bread, its aroma mingling with the morning's crisp air. As the group moved deeper into the barn, they placed letters and photos on a long table, creating an impromptu exhibit of Riverbend's legacy. Phoenix, led by Daniel, made her way among them, nostrils flaring in recognition as hands stroked her neck. Children reached up to touch her flank, tracing the brand as Emma guided them in soft tones. When the ceremony drew to a close, neighbors embraced one another and shared stories of rodeos and rescues. The barn, once a site of ruin and secrecy, now buzzed with renewal. Phoenix nickered, stepping into the sunlight streaming through the open doors. In that reunion at the barn, past and present met under one roof, and the community, bound by memory and hope, looked forward to the chapters still to come. A crisp breeze carried the scent of sage as Daniel led Phoenix onto the open field beyond the barn, the morning light gilding her chestnut coat. Emma followed on foot, holding the restored rodeo ribbon tied to Phoenix's bridle, its faded red fluttering at her side. Behind them, a small procession of riders and onlookers gathered, neighbors on their mounts, some astride aged stock horses, others on fresh acquisitions bred from desert lines. Daniel urged Phoenix forward at a walking pace, then nudged her into a steady trot. The soft thud of hooves on earth echoed across the meadow as Emma walked alongside, her voice offering quiet encouragement. Each participant fell in a place behind them, forming a line that stretched toward the horizon. Above, wisps of cloud drifted across a sky turning pale blue. As they reached the center of the field, Daniel slowed Phoenix to a stop. He dismounted and held out his hand, letting Emma climb onto a nearby sorrel mare. Together, they raised the ribbon overhead, and the group paused in reverent silence. Emma cleared her throat and spoke softly. "For those we lost and those we've found, may their spirits ride free in these fields." Heads bowed as a single breeze swept across the riders, whispering through the grasses. Then, in unison, they launched forward, first a trot, then a graceful canter, before breaking into a full gallop. Phoenix surged ahead, mane flying, leading the ride of remembrance. Daniel and Emma leaned forward, entwined in each other's momentum, hearts pounding in time with their horses' rhythm. Around them, the riders traced a wide circle, the earth trembling beneath the thunder of dozens of hooves. For a moment, time seemed to stretch, the brand on Phoenix's flank catching the sun, gleaming like a beacon. Riders felt the energy of generations beneath them, Roxanne's ghost guiding the path, the resilience of every horse that had carried this lineage through fire and flood. As the gallop eased back to a trot, Daniel guided Phoenix to a gentle halt beside Emma. They exchanged a smile, breathless and exhilarated. The riders closed ranks, forming a cluster of camaraderie. In that ride of remembrance, the past and present united in motion, a living tribute to legacy, endurance, and the unspoken bond between horse and human. Wide-eyed foals frolicked in the morning sun as Daniel and Emma stood at the entrance to their new sanctuary gate, hand in hand. The sign above bore a simple logo, a looping vine embracing a phoenix brand, and the words Riverbend Sanctuary. Beyond the gate lay rolling pastures, shaded paddocks, and gentle hillsides designed to mimic the ranch's original terrain. Phoenix nickered beside them, her coat gleaming copper in the soft light. Daniel knelt to stroke her neck. "This is home now," he murmured. Emma smiled, her eyes sweeping over oak saplings planted along the fence line. "A place for every horse like her," she said, imagining aging desert breeds finding refuge here. Volunteers bustled around, unloading bales of hay and setting out water troughs. A small team from the local historical society arrived with display panels recounting Riverbend's story, from Roxanne's fiery legend to Phoenix's remarkable return. Children gathered, pressing faces against the paddock fence to watch a trio of rescue Mustangs gambol on fresh grass. Their joyful whinnies harmonized with the rustle of leaves overhead. Daniel led Emma toward a cluster of stone markers, each engraved with a horse's name and brand. He traced Phoenix's marker, Phoenix, 1969 brand reborn. Emma knelt beside it, smoothing the cool granite. "They'll never forget," she said softly. Nearby, Dr. Patel and a veterinary team unloaded medical supplies into the on-site clinic. Their presence ensured the sanctuary could offer rehabilitation to injured or neglected horses. Emma watched as a gentle Arabian mare with arthritis was led inside, the vet murmuring reassurance as he examined her fetlocks. As midday approached, the inaugural ribbon-cutting ceremony commenced. Hank Thompson, of silver hair and weathered boots, held scissors alongside Daniel. With a shared nod, they snipped the ribbon, and a ripple of applause rose from the gathered crowd of neighbors, historians, and equine enthusiasts. Phoenix paraded past, tail high, leading a line of sanctuary residents onto the open meadow. Daniel and Emma exchanged proud glances as the horses spread out, grazing contentedly under the vast sky. This sanctuary was more than land and fences. It was a promise to preserve bloodlines, honor legacies, and provide a haven where every hoofbeat echoed with the resilience of those who came before. In that moment, Riverbend's spirit found new life, carried forward by every horse and human who believed in a future born from the ashes of the past. The morning sun cast long shadows across the paddock as Phoenix stood atop a gentle rise, surveying the sanctuary she had inspired. Below her, a group of rescued mares and foals galloped through dew-kissed grass, their manes streaming like banners of hope. Daniel and Emma watched from the fence, arms linked as the scene unfolded, a living tapestry woven from loss, rescue, and renewal. Emma leaned into Daniel's shoulder. "Look at them," she whispered. "All because of her." Phoenix dipped her head in acknowledgement, ears swiveling at the sound of distant hoofbeats. A team of students from the local university approached, clipboards in hand, ready to study the desert-adapted bloodlines that now thrived here. Dr. Patel walked beside them, offering insights into genetic markers and long-term health data. Across the meadow, a plaque mounted on a weathered post bore Phoenix's brand alongside Roxanne's, linked by an arrow of chrome. Visitors paused to read. From ashes, endurance, from legend, life. Children clustered around the marker, tracing the brands with small fingers and trading excited whispers about the horse who carried two bloodlines into a new era. Daniel turned to Emma, eyes shining. "Her legacy isn't just DNA," he said. "It's everything we've built: community, scholarship, compassion." Emma nodded, thinking of the flood that revealed hidden letters, the barn reunion that stitched townspeople together, and the rodeo ride that echoed history in motion. Phoenix trotted down the hill toward them, inviting a gentle pat. Daniel led her to a watering trough shaped like an elegant basin, where the sanctuary's name was etched in stone. As she drank, the reflection of her brand shimmered on the water's surface, a reminder of trials overcome. Volunteers moved between stalls, tending wounds and feeding grain, their laughter interwoven with the soft nickers of grateful horses. A banner fluttered overhead, proclaiming Riverbend Sanctuary, honoring the past, shaping the future. Under it, Daniel and Emma unveiled a small time capsule containing letters, photographs, and a strand of Phoenix's mane, meant to be opened 50 years hence. As the sun climbed, Phoenix raised her head, nostrils flaring at the scent of new beginnings. Daniel placed a hand on her flank. "Your story will live on," he promised. And in that promise, Phoenix's legacy found its strongest form, not in archives or genetics, but in each heartbeat that echoed across the sanctuary she helped create. The sun dipped low, casting long, golden rays across the sanctuary as Daniel led Phoenix to the edge of her favorite pasture. The scheduled gathering was small, just a handful of close friends, volunteers, and Emma by his side, but each presence felt profound. Today marked Phoenix's final farewell before her guided return to the wild plains beyond the sanctuary's fence. Phoenix paused at the threshold, ears pricked toward the open range. Daniel knelt to adjust her bridle and smiled through a lump in his throat. "You've given us everything," he whispered, voice catching. She nuzzled his shoulder, amber eyes reflecting trust and quiet strength. Emma stood opposite, holding a worn halter that had traveled this journey with Phoenix from the auction pen to these fields. She offered it to Daniel, who clasped it gently. Together, they draped it across the fence post, a symbolic handoff from caretakers to freedom. A respectful hush fell as Daniel spoke. Phoenix was born of legend, reborn by compassion, and now returns to claim her inheritance, the open land where her ancestors once roamed. May she carry our gratitude as she strides into tomorrow. His words lingered in the cool evening air. Phoenix stretched forward, one hoof stepping beyond the sanctuary boundary. At her movement, volunteers opened the gate fully. With a graceful nod from Daniel, she trotted out, mane flowing like embers in the dying light. Emma's eyes glistened as she watched Phoenix's silhouette merge with the horizon's curve. Moments later, Phoenix looked back once, head raised high, gaze steady, before she turned and vanished into the wild grasses. Daniel and Emma stayed at the fence until the final glow of her coat disappeared against the landscape. They returned to the sanctuary grounds, where the fresh halter hung as a memorial and volunteers extinguished lanterns one by one. Under the first evening star, Emma slipped her hand into Daniel's. "She'll find her way," she said softly. Daniel nodded, placing a hand over his heart. "And so will her story." In the quiet that followed, the sanctuary felt both empty and full. Empty of Phoenix's presence, yet full of the promise her journey inspired. In that final farewell, they understood that true sanctuary isn't defined by walls or fences, but by the freedom and hope we give and let go. The dawn chorus of meadowlarks greeted Daniel as he rode quietly through the sanctuary's central pasture, sunlight warming the dew on tall grasses. Though Phoenix had returned to the wild weeks ago, her presence lingered in every whisper of wind and sway of sage. Daniel paused at the spot where the fence ended, tracing a fingertip along the weathered post, now etched with her final hoofprint. He dismounted and walked barefoot, memory guiding his steps to the time capsule's resting place beneath a young oak. Emma joined him, carrying a folded cloth containing a single feather, an honor from a visiting raptor researcher. Together, they knelt at the oak's base and lifted the capsule's lid. Inside lay letters from children who had visited, photos of Phoenix leading the ride of remembrance, and a lock of her mane braided with ribbon. Each memento told of lives touched and stories reborn. Emma smiled through tears as she held a postcard depicting a full-born at the sanctuary, its coat a warm chestnut echoing Phoenix's. "Her spirit lives on," she said softly. Daniel nodded, laying the feather beside the ribbon. "In every life we save." They sealed the capsule and buried it once more, marking the spot with a simple stone carved with a phoenix rising from a vine-wrapped R. A gentle breeze swept through the oak's branches, as if blessing their vow to revisit in 50 years. As they stood, A herd of wild Mustangs thundered into view beyond the boundary, a testament to the desert's resilience and the sanctuary's mission. Among them, Phoenix appeared, mane lifted by the morning breeze, leading the group before veering off toward distant hills. Daniel watched, breath caught, as she disappeared into the golden light. Turning back, he and Emma rode side by side through paddocks now flourishing with native grasses. Volunteers tending to newly arrived rescues waved from the barn door, their laughter carrying warmth across the fields. Daniel raised his hand in salute, and Emma echoed the gesture. By midday, the sanctuary buzzed with preparation for the season's first educational tour. Visitors would learn of Phoenix's tale and the legacy she inspired, how a single mare transformed a community's understanding of compassion, heritage, and hope. In that moment, Daniel felt the full weight of their journey, from a $10 auction bid to a living testament of rebirth. Phoenix's legacy had transcended brand and bloodline. It lived in every heart she'd touched and every hoofbeat echoing across the land she once called home.